Dzień dobry. Nazywam się Joanna Leśnierowska i zapraszam Was na kolejną rozmowę z cyklu Co nam zrobi taniec? To cykl, jaki realizujemy razem z Warszawskim Obserwatorium Kultury w oczekiwaniu na otwarcie pierwszej instytucji dla tańca w Warszawie. W jego ramach pytamy o to, co nam może dać, każdemu z osobna i całej naszej wspólnocie, regularne obcowanie z tańcem, jego doświadczanie i praktykowanie. Pochylamy się tutaj nad zagadnieniami odpowiedzialności i sprawczości choreografii, pytamy o ich znaczenie w kontekście społecznym i o to, jakie umiejętności i jaką wiedzę generują artyści tańca oraz jak możemy się tą wiedzą dzielić. Takie spojrzenie na taniec i choreografię w ich poszerzonym pozaartystycznym spektrum pozwoli nam także, mam nadzieję, na rozpoznanie powodów, dla których choreografia od dekad nieustannie zyskuje na znaczeniu. Dzisiejsza rozmowa jest zapisem mojego spotkania z belgijskim dramaturgiem i autorem wielu publikacji o tańcu i choreografii, Guy Coolsem. Wspólnie snujemy refleksję nad tym, co choreografia może nam zaoferować oraz co dla samego Guy znaczy jego wieloletnia relacja z tańcem. Rozmawiamy także o mikro i makro dramaturgiach. Gorąco zapraszam. Hello, He. I'm very grateful that in your always busy schedule between continents, between Canada and Europe, you found time to meet us and talk a little bit about the choreography and what choreography can do for us. So let me start with a question. Do you believe choreography can help to heal the world?
Thank you, Joanna, for inviting me for this talk. It's going to be a very long answer, and maybe you have to interrupt me if you want to certain things to expand on it. Maybe I start a little bit with. I think I started working in the field in the mid 1980s in Belgium. And at that time, I think we were still very much, the dominant paradigm was very much this Western modernist paradigm of art for art's sake. And there was also, it felt at that time, a hierarchy between like the art, the high art for the museum and the stage, and then a lot of what was considered community artwork. And there was a sense of yeah, that there was a difference in priority and a difference in quality as well. And I think from the beginning, I have questioned that. I think the history, if you go back to the beginning of human history, and also look out geographically to other cultures, there was never this separation from art and life. And often in the origin, and this is my firm belief, that art, healing, and say maybe some spiritual beliefs and instead of religion were always interconnected. And it's really been the Western history to separate these. And what I've noticed in this, I'm now active in this field for almost 40 years. I feel around the term of the millennium, there has been a shift in the mentality, also especially in the younger generation of artists, where we're slowly erasing this separation. And that younger artists are more making these links between art and healing, between art and society, and even between art and some spiritual convictions. And I found it is extremely positive. And that together with erasing this separation, there's also no longer this hierarchy, or there's an attempt. I mean, of course, whenever a new paradigm comes into life, the old paradigm continues to exist, and there's still, of course, stardom, and there's still like so especially if it's in the media, sometimes this distinction between high art of the museum and then community art. But in reality, like a lot of the contemporary community art has extremely high artistic values. And I even remember, I think it was not the last one, but the one but last Biennale in Venice, for instance, where the main exhibition was making these links between high art and community-oriented aspects. And I think at that time, like it was of course more visual arts, but there's somebody like Anna Halprin was in the main, and her work was in the main exhibition of the Biennale of Venice. Which was for me, and Halprin is, for instance, one of these figures. I also think in North America, and I think because this is also my experience from Canada, and maybe it was because of economic reasons partially, but dance practice as a therapeutic practice or as a somatic practices that are used for healing, and dance as an art practice have always been much more interconnected. And choreographers often, next to their artistic work, have been developing therapeutic practice, and then often they have been integrating both of them. So there's a longer tradition there, and Anna Halprin, I think, is one of the pioneers of that.
So do you believe that dance has such a power to help our
Uh,
multi-crises, us in the multi-crises?
Again,
If you believe, then please tell me how.
yeah. I think I'm going to try to connect some of my personal experiences and then also with some examples, maybe. Um, the first thing is what do we consider healing? That's like a big question. And what are the conditions for healing? And again, there in the Western tradition, we've like healing is something that comes from the outside. It's like medical treatment, with drugs and other things. But I think again, the basis of healing is always self-awareness as an individual about your own body, or as society about what are the problems we're facing up, and how are we going to change our way of living, or change of, or again on a personal level or on a society level, to improve to this situation. And for that, I think somatic practices and dance are an amazing tool, because it's all about the awareness of developing, and that's also like a great awareness of your own body. And this is a little bit my personal history. I'm happy to share this. Between the age of 2 and 3, I had life-threatening operations that again, if I would have been born in another place or another time, I would not have survived them. So I'm grateful for traditional medicine, and I don't reject traditional medicine. But going through these operations at such a young age also left very strong traumatic experiences that were very deeply ingrained in my body. And then added on that, I had another trauma at the age of 6 when my father died in a car accident, and I was not able to fully live my grief and my mourning process. And so when I was in my and this through my childhood into my early adulthood, like into my late 20s, this created both a lot of physical and also mental issues that I had to deal with. And until then, also like early, my I never was attracted to dance, because I had also a very weak physical constitution, where any kind of physical practice I was kind of and so my original studies were more in literature and theater. I was attracted to the performing scene. But when I finished my original master's in literature and theater studies, if somebody had told me that I would continue most of my career in dance, I would have not believed it. But then shortly after, I got introduced to dance, first as a critic, And slowly, if I look at my own journeys, that it's through the choreographers I've accompanied as a producer, presenter, and later as a dramaturg. It's by integrating some of their practices in and applying them to my own body that I became aware of some of my own issues, and that I started to address them and heal them. So this is on the individual level. But I think the same thing can happen on a larger society level and community level. And again, more and more artists. I mean, even somebody like Bill Forsyth was like, I mean, acknowledges this healing capacity. Somebody like Sidim Larbi Cherkaoui, with whom I worked for a long time as a dramaturg in the young generations. So even like today, the major stars of the dance world often have, maybe they're not always so public about it, but often they acknowledge in their own practice that there is this potential. And I'm going to make there's another thing that, there's the agency of doing a project with a community and offering them some kind of support through the artistic work. But there's also, I'm a strong believer, a deeper function of art that I've been exploring, amongst others, with Sidim Larbi Cherkaoui. And this goes back to a small book that has been very influential in my thinking, and it's called Myth and the Body. And it's this transcript of a series of dialogues. I think it was at the time done for radio, because it was before this kind of communication existed, between Joseph Kelemen, who's one of the founders of somatic practices in Berkeley, the United States, and Joseph Campbell, the big theorist of Western mythology. And I mean, there's a lot of it's a tiny book, but there's a lot of interesting ideas in this book. And one of the ideas is they say that, like, what the myth is a kind of the storytelling narrative form of what DNA is of in the scientific language, like that. So that all myths talk actually about our body. Like, if you think about, and that a lot of the symbols in myths related to parts of our body, like think of the crown of thorns in Christianity, but also the serpent as the spinal column. So there's this metaphors, images that are all connected to parts of our body, to our embodiment as human beings. And then they continue to say that one of the functions of art is to create what they call mythic images. And a mythic image is, again, an image that resonates with the body of the spectator, of the one who receives it. And again, I don't think it has a capacity to heal illness, but it has a capacity to trigger this awareness. And again, I think that's the first step in a healing process, is to become aware of the problem and then address it yourself. And so I think a lot of contemporary art, that's the political dimension, is to show us the problems that exist in the world, offer a different perspective, make people aware, and then hopefully follow up. There's a follow-up process where this awareness leads to a change, like that. Mm. There is even, in this notion of mythic image, there's even, I mean, it can happen through rationalization, to reflection, but I also am a deep believer that it can have a direct somatic impact. So where there's seeing a work of art triggers something emotionally, energetically, somatically. And when we worked with Sidim Larbi, we created a work which is called Myth, and we was kind of looking at recreating mythic images from different cultures and different religions. And we had, I mean, I have not many proof, but I remember one time when we presented the piece in Kalamata in Greece, and I had to give an after talk a couple of days later after the performance about the creation process and the reasons. There was a woman in the audience saying, like, You know, like in the performance, I saw an image. It was literally an image that has been haunting my nightmares all my life. And after seeing it in the perform, and I hadn't dreamt this image for a while, but after seeing the performance, it came back in my dream the next day, but it has shifted. It wasn't so frightening anymore. It was, I mean, it's a small proof, but it was for me a very concrete proof that we had um, 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 had been able to do that. And I think, I'm even a strong believer, and this is again, my belief is based on my personal experience, uh, that you can even do that with very abstract forms. Because that's also the thing about art. What art does, I mean, I think you can only create these strong images if they're based on personal experience. So I think that's why all art needs to be rooted, I think, in a personal experience. But then you find a form to communicate it with other people. And this transformation process can be healing for yourself, but then can also have this trigger of awareness with the spectator. And I had a couple of times that in my life that with even abstract paintings, and because I knew we were going to have this talk, one of the strongest experiences is by a Polish visual artist that maybe you know, Roman Opalka.
Of course.
Uh, and I remember, I think it was in the late 90s because I was still curating the dance program in Vooruit in Ghent, as part of it was not a, it was part of a larger exhibition, but there was one room with four of his number paintings, no? So he started to paint all from 1965 until he died in 2011. He did only one thing, which was painting on the one canvas. He started numbering from 0 till infinity, and he was just using different shades from gray, black, and eventually also white. So there were four paintings of him in one room, but they were from different periods. And just going into the room, and I think I was also lucky that I was alone, and it was probably also for me the right moment in time. But yeah, it started to resonate with me like in a very deep, energetic way like that. And I never forget that moment. I think I have a similar experience with some of Pollock's work, and I think more people have with that because I think Pollock was a master in using the pigment of color to and another, which was a close friend, was Tobia Colino, was an Italian painter, was a friend, and I used to spend a lot of time with him a period of my life while he was painting, or when they were in his atelier, paintings he was working on. And sometimes I had literally um, look, and these were also abstract paintings and he was also a master in color technique, but they were kind of Röntgen pictures of my own body, and that they were kind of parts in my body that were resonating with these pictures. And the same thing is with now I'm giving visual art and like abstract forms as an example, but the same thing is with the voice, of course. We know all that. Why do certain singers, why do their voices vibrate more with us on an emotional level? Again, having gone through the experience myself of a very deep and long mourning process, I can recognize this in other people's voices. And then again, in my own research, I've been working with these traditional lament forms where these old women who've gone through a personal experience that are able to recreate that experience in their laments to support other people in their emotional release of a mourning process, which is another both traditional example, but I think my research has been into that. A lot of contemporary art forms can have a similar function, have a similar intention, and also do work in the way.
Thank you very much for sharing these very personal experiences. Actually, when I now puts together the paintings of Opałka that you mentioned and your lament practice, I have a feeling that we are actually exactly landing in the same field of research, because I do perceive Opałka's insistence of coming from zero to infinity as a beautiful metaphor of our existence on this earth. And in a way, it is a form of lament also on everything we need to let go while we progress on our path, right? And then it's a very beautiful way, of course, and a visual, abstract, but also so concrete way to refer to a very personal experience that at the same time connects us in his taking commonality in a way, because we are all on the same path from the moment we are born, right? And also, if I can share my associations that are and recollections of experiences that come back, I had similar feelings when I look Agnes Martin work and paintings, because it's seemingly abstract and minimalist. It's triggering so much concrete emotions. It was Yvonne Rainer saying feelings are facts, right? I mean, an icon of postmodern that actually quite early in her choreographing career had to admit that feelings are facts. There are an embodied reality that we are living. And in the same time, for me, confrontation with abstract art is also same concrete. And I'm always fascinated with a phenomenon that I can feel similar feelings when looking at abstract painting and abstract expressionists like Pollock or like Agnes Martin, that actually claimed herself to be abstract expressionists, and looking at paintings of Edward Hopper that we all know so well. We have seen hundreds and thousands and millions of reproductions and covers also in pop culture, and still being called the biggest American realists still triggers so much of those mythical also connections, associations with some abstract, symbolic, metaphorical, emotional zones triggered in us when we encounter this work. And I found it a beautiful juxtaposition to choreography that can, as we know, also encompass both experiences. And even if abstract so often is done with such a concrete material, which is our human body, right? So that actually never can be abstract to the degree we sometimes want to, or artists tend to do it. And also when you were talking, I was reminded of nota bene Canadian artist, photographer Jeff Wall, who once has been asked in an interview whether he believed art can change the world. And then his answer was very blunt: I don't believe so. However, what I do believe is that art can change an onlooker and her relation to the world. And I think that also resonates very much with what you just have said, with this ability or agency of art being able to raise an awareness of our own bodies, of our own emotions. And I found it an incredible power that is actually so much less violent than an idea that through our art we can change somebody. So I really love the fact that I do believe choreography is one of those beautiful artworks that is able and has this, I think, in a way, agenda to emancipate the spectator, as Rancière wanted. And therefore, it is so relevant that we are able to offer audiences, our fellow citizens, a possibility to encounter choreography on a regular daily basis. And that means also, of course, as a spectators, but on the other hand, you also mentioned that through the practice of dance. And I actually wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you never thought you're gonna end up in a field of dance and choreography, but then you entered, and then not only you have become the writer and dramaturg, accompanying many artists on their ways, creative processes. But also you have developed your own practice and you started to improvise yourself. Can you tell me a little bit how this experience shaped your way of both accompanying other artists in their creative paths and your own experience of watching dance and understanding its soft powers?
Before I answer that question, I'd like to come back to one thing about Opalka, which I think is very relevant, and that was triggered by your comment at the beginning of your I think the reason why I had this kind of very strong, energetic, and maybe also emotional experience was exactly because the energy that he spent all his life in this practice, like a very simple, repetitive, it was not repetitive, but the practice that he kept for, uh,
Yeah, it was a form of meditation. Yeah,
it was for meditation like that. The other thing that I very strongly, as you said, his project was also, it was about also accepting his own mortality. Because he's saying like, I'm going to do this until infinity, which is when I'm die, but then the work lives on behind me. I think a lot of our actual problems in our society are related to the fact that, again, a certain type of, I think it's Western, I think it's patriarchal personality doesn't accept its own mortality. Things that has already given up on this planet. I mean, let's name it like somebody like Musk and his Mars vision, and as a result, are not taking care of it for future generations like that. And I think this is once you learn to accept your own mortality, you also know that you're here for only a limited, very limited time in the history of humanity and in the history of this planet, and that it's your responsibility to pass on this planet to the next generation in a better condition than you received it. And I think this is the big learning process that we're going through. There's a lot of, I'm personally, I'm kind of pessimistic on the short term, but I'm optimistic on the long term because I think this is always with these paradigm shifts that the old paradigm tries to stay in power. But I see, especially in the younger generation, also a lot of hopeful signs. And also, again, art can contribute to that by supporting that awareness. There's a second point that you also kind of mentioned in your comment. We can't do it alone. So the function of art, both in traditionally and today, is to bring together community. And we need community to support each other, but also to develop an agency that has a real impact and leads to real change and transformation. So that I think again, this is what really and then dance is a particular good art form for that, because dance always historically, again, dance has never been historically an art of representation. It has an art that you participate in, and that brings the community together for rituals like personal rituals like marriages, but also larger rituals of like the rites of passage, or to commemorate experiences that the community has lived through. And I also see a lot of contemporary choreographers going back to integrating this participative aspect, still keeping a high artistic level, or making the dialogue, the audience going through an experience more than just looking at the results of an arts practice. To come back to my own practice rewriting distance, again, it was one of these was triggered by an invitation by a friend and colleague, Lynn Snelling. I never had a big ambition to be on stage myself, but again, at that moment, and I also trusting her, it felt okay. This is an experience that will make my own experience just richer, and we've been developing this practice over now 20 years. Each time I have to do it in front of an audience, it's still a huge challenge. I find because just to prepare myself physically and mentally. But at the same time, once I do it, I now also have a comfortable in it because it's by repeating the experience in different contexts that you also learn and to better understand it. We said it would be an improvised. The way we set it up, the practice is that it's an improvised practice. On a formal level, we were interested in connecting movement, spoken language, and writing, which is normally also a very solitary practice, but we wanted to see how we could do writing together and in front of an audience, so also to make it more collectively. And we always said on the level of content, it was a form of improvised storytelling that was always connected to the place that we were exploring and we were performing in. And these places were always non-traditional theater, like site-specific ones that had, and so we were also working with the history of that place. Which could be a slaughterhouse in Limassol, Cyprus, which could be the dance studio of the place in London, where generations of dancers and choreographers had injured themselves. And so it was the combination of the place and the actual audience that then would, and this is also my belief, that's then the presence of the audience and the energy and there that triggered what stories would emerge, because we will not predetermine which story we would tell. We would tell the story that was needed for that particular group of people in that particular moment. And also there is this kind of, call it magic, but it's more this, the way that we prepare ourselves is tune in to the place, to the people who are there in the moment, and then we let emerge. That was the kind of craft that we tried to develop. We let emerge without judging or without directing ourselves what would emerge. And again, there's not that many, but we had a couple of times proof where again, I remember one time we did it in a place on a small island in front of the coast of Vancouver Island in Canada. And this small island was indigenous territory, and it was a nature reservoir, like with deer, and there was only one building on it, which was a traditional longhouse, which had been kind of colonized and used in the 1930s for kind of people from Vancouver coming, white people from Vancouver coming with boats to have picnics and parties there. And there was also ballroom dancing, so multifunctional. But this building and this environment was very strong. And again, in preparing public performances, we practice, we explore, and then I think in that case we did 2 or 3 public performances. And again, there's one woman, just one example, but this is, for me, was proven off, who came to us afterwards and saying, listen, the story you told tonight, it's literally described in the diary of my mother or grandmother, who was in this room in the 1930s. And again, I want to nuance. I don't think we actually told that story, but the way that we tell it was so open that she could project her own experience in it like that. And I think this is, for me, another key thing, and that in this communication between art and the spectator, is that the artist uses a personal experience, he finds a form to express it, and the form can be very abstract. and then the audience seeing the form, if it works well, has their own experiences, which can be memories, emotions, energetic experiences that are not identical to the one that the artist channeled, but belong to them like that. And then I think dance is a particularly powerful art form because of it works with the body and because it works with a certain abstractness, in the sense that theater, for instance, the narrative of theater is often leaves more space for the imagination or the projection of the audience, but dance always does that to a large extent like that.
Yeah. I actually wanted to also ask you about the project that you have curated and coached for a while, a European project called Micro and Macro Dramaturgies in Dance. Could you expand a little bit about the idea? What is microdramaturgy and macrodramaturgy, and what the project was about? Because I have a feeling it exactly tapped into the questions that we are asking ourselves today.
Mhm. So the title is a reference to Marianne van Kerkhove, who's together with Raymond Hogan in Germany. Marianne van Kerkhove was the first Flemish Belgian dance dramaturg who was credited as being a dance dramaturg in the early 1980s, around the same period as Raymond Hogan started to work with Pina Bausch in Germany. And her thinking and writing about dance dramaturgy is the most articulate and influential still until the day. And as a dance dramaturg, I consider myself. I also the privilege to meet her and personally, so I feel like I'm working in her vision still today. Um, and I mean, she has a lot of it's, it's I mean, I teach like full-length courses on just on this subject. So she was also able to articulate different forms of dramaturgy, and how dance dramaturgy, what the specificities are of dance dramaturgy compared, for instance, with theater. But she also introduced in two short essays, which one of them is only available in Flemish, unfortunately. She talked about what she called the small and the big dramaturgy, if you translate the Flemish literary. And then in the early translations, those early references, they use minor and major. But then now today, I think we prefer micro and macro, which says micro dramaturgy is the kind of the dramaturgy inside the work, which is a lot about how you create coherence, how you create significance inside the work. But then the macro dramaturgy is how the work and the artist relate to society. And she was also very articulate, saying that it's always the task of the artist to and of the dramaturg accompanying the artist to create meaningful links between the micro and the macro dramaturgy. So again, now the year it was leading up to the pandemic. I was invited by structure in Italy, which is Anghiari Dance Hub, which had been working as a dramaturg and mentor for a number of years, to, if I could imagine, support conceiving a European project that would, I mean, originally the idea was to create an alternative educational project formation for younger dance dramaturgs, but more practice-based, that would be supported by a more mature generation of dramaturgs. Because there's today dance dramaturgy is taught in universities, but it's still very much a theoretical subject and sometimes the practice experience. So starting from that, I helped Anghiari to find European partners, and I also brought together a team of more mature dramaturgs to curate it. And the idea was to curate a series of intensive residency workshops where we would, yeah, create a platform because dramaturgs very seldom meet with each other. an exchange with each other. We're always kind of working with the artists, and so that was in the end, I think, the success of the project. I mean, I had to pull out because then the pandemic arrived and it was postponed, and then it came into conflict with other engagements. But I think I was able still to do the first residency that kicked off the project that I co-created in Italy. And already then it was established that it would be much more horizontal. There were different generations of people in the room, but in the end, we felt like we were just working from peer to peer. And I learned as much from the younger generation as I think I could offer them. Like they were also, again, because there's something also about with the crises that we live that um, I mean this younger generation has a much more activist uh, out of necessity vision of how to integrate the art world into society. So that was, and the project is now also well documented. There's there's a website and there's a glossary that was written by all the people involved, participants, mentors, but also the participating organizations like that.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. We will definitely share the link with everybody who listens to us. I was actually wondering how do you recognize also the ability to practice micro and macro dramaturgies on other in the other roles that we are taking on us throughout our years of working in the field of dance? You are actually the person that has shape-shifted so many times, and you are very openly talking about it and writing about it. And I believe it is also becoming a certain practice of yours throughout your career to always question what you do, how, and then transition to another part, staying within the field of choreography still. And I wanted to ask you whether in these different moments of your work life, when you have been a programmer, when you have been a writer, when you also performed yourself, and when you supported artists as a dramaturg, how do you see this practice of macro and micro dramaturgy, especially macro dramaturgy, relating to the social issues, especially when you are running the venue? In Warsaw, we are just excited and awaiting an opening of the first ever dance venue. And I think that this is also a very important question to reflect on. And then what tools of macro dramaturgy could support this thinking?
I remember very well, and it was also, I mean, it was supported because there was now I forget her name, but there was a French master student which did her thesis about my practice as a curator. So it is kind of also documented in written form. When I was very young when when I was dropped into this position. I was 26. Um, I was asked to curate originally a theater and dance program for this art center. At that time, we had very little financial means because the support from the government came later. And it was in a city that was not my home city, it was in Ghent, myself from Antwerp. Um, and I went in with this kind of naive understanding of curating. Okay, you have on the one hand, you have local audience that wants to see dance. And on the other hand, you have artists that you believe in and you want to bring these two together. So I went in with the metaphor of a scale. Say sometimes you think more about what the audience needs, and sometimes you think more about, okay, this artist really deserves to be seen. Um, but very quickly, I changed my metaphor, and I start to think about it. It's much more complex, and I start to use the now I don't know the English word, like the rose de vent in French, when the wind and
The
all the like it's all the directions of that the wind can come from. How you call this in like like if north, south, east, west, and
yeah,
and
the rose of wind, I think.
yeah. So this
Let's
kind of
check it out. We will check that up.
so that's like 360 degrees, and the reflection came. So it's not just a binary; it's kind of a full complex ecology. Um, and I start very much to think about okay, also landscape. Uh, this environment, what is and there's the audience and there's the artists still are part of the landscape. There's also the infrastructure. There's also the politicians. There's the media. I mean, there's so many players in this landscape. And in the end, and this is the macro dramaturgy, even if the micro dramaturgy, you make individual choices for a performance or for an artist in function of something that you want, that you believe in, or that in the end, the main goal was to develop this landscape over a longer period so that it becomes richer and healthier and more alive. And this is what we very much did in Ghent, because when I arrived there, there was only Alain Platel's Les Balanciers de la Baie. So we start, of course, you start by supporting what is already there and giving it more also visibility. But then you also, for instance, I was very conscious I would always start bringing in things that I felt were missing in the landscape, so to make it richer. And when I left after 12 years, Barbara Raas, who replaced me, she continued to do that, and she was able to even to go further than I had gone, because again, she was building on the foundations that were already laid. And I think again today this is always now I'm recently now in a full-time academic position at in Montreal. They made me responsible of an existing master program. I mean, the dance program exists for 40 years, the master maybe not so long. And again, my first thing, okay, I have to make micro-dramaturgical choices about which courses will we offer to the students, which students do we accept. I mean, these are kind of on the but in the end, my macro-dramaturgical reflection is how can I develop this program within an existing landscape that starts with the department, the university, the city, the country, the world. And that's also Marianne van Kerkhove. That's the metaphor that she used when she talked about these macro dramaturgies. This is like the theater is in the world, is in the city, and the city is in the world. And their walls are from skin, so they're porous. So all and of course you have to stay. I think you have to stay uh, always very practical and concrete, and make micro choices that you hope will contribute uh, to the macro. And you're never sure. I mean, and you also make mistakes, and you have to adjust yourself. But in the end, it's again, it goes back to what we were discussing earlier. I think we should, as human beings, we should be this should be our priority, be caretakers for the future generations, my children, my grandchildren. So it's also about um, take every choice you take consciously, uh, trying to improve the future, not just for yourself, but mainly for them, because I mean, you have another maybe have another 10, maybe maximum 20 years to go, and then you should leave something behind that they can build on further like that.
Mm. It's a beautiful thought. I think that we have got a lot of thought for reflection. So let me thank you for sharing those personal experiences and all your thoughts, and staying grateful for all the inspiration. I hope we will meet next time in Warsaw in a brand new dance venue that all our community of artists and spectators are looking for. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
No, thank you for the invitation. It would be lovely to visit. I mean, I've only been to Warsaw one time, which was again, I don't know, 2016, 17. There was an exchange project between Swiss and Polish choreographers. But again, the richness of this project was the bringing together of two communities over a period of 2 weeks where they exchanged. Because that's the other thing is that I think um, we have to build our own community, but then we also have to be open to the world and the other communities, and we can only develop ourselves and learn from that exchange like that. I
And
would
that
be happy to come and visit.
we make sure it's gonna happen. It also makes me think about the author you actually have recommended to me, Adam Krauss, who has been writing about the political dimension of art. And in his also very tiny book, although full of interesting ideas, he was bringing up this idea of art as ecosystem and ecology that is only thriving if the variety of its members and is being provided. So all the work we can do through choreography by bringing people together, people locally and also on this macro scale from all over, and creating the temporary or permanent communities to support each other and to learn from each other. I hope this is going to be what also the Warsaw place will provide for us. So first of all, a place where we can come together. And I can't wait to see you there and spend some time with you there. Thanks a lot.